a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. You should already know who I am. Give me coffee or give me coffee. I am not into dying. Once I started drinking Organic Man Coffee Trike coffee, I found it was a huge disappointment anytime I had other people's brew. Now, Squatch coffee is really good. A Gunner was on the show a long time ago. I need to talk to Julio about maybe putting Squatch coffee on the shelf. 4501 McPherson is home to the best coffee in the universe. Think I don't know my coffee? Swing by and try a cup and see what happens. If you don't feel like driving to Laredo, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. Treat those taste buds like they're your best buds. The Garretitis had suggested a show about strange cryptids at the same time as attachments. I did the attachments, so here are some more strange cryptids. Cryptozoology is defined as the study of animals whose existence is not substantiated by mainstream science. You know, the boys in the white lab coat that never want to leave the lab. The term cryptozoology combines the Greek word kryptos, which means hidden, and zoon for animal. It was proposed and popularized in the 1950s by zoologist Bernard Heuvelmans and Ivan T. Sanderson. I have I have listeners in Iceland. I don't speak their language. I understand it's one of the hardest to learn. I have a hard enough time with English. I am going to muscle through these names, but I know I'm not going to pronounce them correctly. I just hope I'm not saying something bad. Remember, this is a family show, so if I begin to swear in Icelandic, all I can say is I'm sorry. I tried to find out how to pronounce these words. The Jorulali, it starts with an F. FJO with 2 dots above. Rulali. Jor, Jorulali. That's close enough. Is just one name for a cryptid from Iceland. They're also called beach bugs, which I should probably call them that because I can pronounce it. They have a lot of other names as well. These creatures are mostly found along the shoreline. They're commonly found in Brefjord and the West Fjords, but spread from there all the way to the coast of Valafjora. Like I said, I do not speak Icelandic. They use too many consonants, I think. Or maybe they're like the Welsh. They're just mad at people and decided to write things in an unpronounceable way. The shoreline is not mentioned in many of the ancient writings, but first appears in the 19th century. A 13-year-old boy saw a beach bug while he was out on a scurry in, yeah, okay, off the shore of Iceland. A scurry is a small wooden sailing boat. The town is Breio with an X above it, I believe. AFJ, one of more of those O's with two dots. Another O with an X. UR. Briorfjord. Okay, I can't pronounce it. He said it looked kind of like a dog, but it was a lot bigger, had very short legs, and chubby, with a white tail that reminded him of a sheep. He said he'd not been able to distinguish whether its head had any ears or if those were small horns, nor could he distinguish the shape of the jawline. It was always turning its hindquarters towards him. The boy was being mooned by this creature. In 1851, a 13-year-old boy was sent out to help his father on a small rocky island. When he arrived, he saw a beach bug down sitting on a slab of rock. He ran towards it, trying to get a closer look, but the beast saw him coming and it started lumbering off in the direction of the water. He did manage to throw a rake handle at the animal, which it yelped when it was hit, and then it dove into the water. It was described as looking like a dog, but a lot fatter, short legs, and scruffy with a short tail that also looked like a sheep. 1934, a man said he saw the beach bug just outside his living room window at Bullingford Point. The man described it as being black or very dark brown with scruffy fur. It was very low to the ground because of very short legs and stout with kind of a box shaped torso. It had a short neck with a small round head. It moved in a way that resembled no land animal that he knew of. It would throw its front legs forward at the same time, as if it were hopping instead of running. He watched the creature as it shambled away, and it either laid down in the tall grass near the trees or it disappeared into the woodland. These accounts were all translated using a computer program that got some of the words right, but it also messed up a lot of the meaning. When I was reading the articles, it was from a Icelandic paper, and well, like I said, so hopefully the computer translation got these stories correct. December 23rd, 1934, a hunter named Giffenor Jacobson. Hey, I can pronounce that last name. Jacobson said he encountered a beach bug while fox hunting at night in Grunvik district. Eventually, Jacobson stopped near a large boulder where he saw an unusually bulky, short-legged animal laying under it. When he got closer, the creature started lumbering towards the shore, making a scraping noise as it went. Jacobson shot at the creature twice, but he believes he missed because the creature just continued wandering off into the rocky shoreline and then into the sea. A more recent sighting of what may be a beach bug was featured in the 23rd issue of Fortean Times magazine in 1985, as well as various other local newspapers. I used to get Fortean Times back when you couldn't find everything on computers. Actually, I don't think there were computers at the time, not desktops. I would go to a bookstore and I would ask one of the clerks if they carried Fortean Times. And without fail, they would say, yes, we have a 14. And they would give me kind of an odd look like, why is this old guy wanting to buy a teenage magazine? I would have to explain to them it's not 14, it's Fortean. Then I would have to tell them who Charles Fort was and what he used to write about and how now there's a magazine based on his investigations. I did try subscribing to Fortean magazine. It would be shipped over from England, probably stuffed inside a box full of frozen fish and chips, because when it would finally get to my door, sometimes the cover was missing, sometimes the pages were all folded over. It always came in a mess every time. So I just stopped buying it. I'm getting away from the story. The report, which occurred in 1984, was by two bird hunters, Julius Asgerson and Olafur Olafsson, while walking around Lake Leifvart, which is about a mile from the sea. Leif, Kleifarvatn. Now, they said they first found some odd footprints along the shoreline, as well as seeing what looked like two dog-like animals swimming around in the lake nearby. Unlike most other beach bug sightings, they described these as being larger than horses. One man said she was black or very dark, hairy and plump, short and squat, with no tail. It can be said that it had been boxed in on its body shape. Like I said, the translation of the computer program was a bit bad. A bit. The neck was very short and the head was small and globous, as if it were pressed against the body. Globus means it was shaped like a globe. Down from the chubby body were four hairy legs and no higher than the equivalent of an arm. When she moved, her gait or leg action differed from that of land creatures. She carried both front legs forward at the same time, as if she were hopping. And so she waded down into the field and laid down again. I hope that's what the article said. Stories say that the skin of the beach bug, also called a beach lizard, is covered with shells, sometimes lava, and it rattles when it moves. People in different parts of Iceland, seeing an unknown creature, began calling it names such as Skilljalabi, Skellijal, Joralabi, Rickenfur, a sulfur, a Joradur, and simply just a lally. I like beach bug much better. I can pronounce it. As these descriptions began to spread all over the island, some folks began to realize that maybe they were all the same creature. They were all beach bugs, just the local inhabitants were giving them different names. Pregnant women were told to be careful if they saw one of these creatures because their presence might be detrimental to the fetus. This is right up there with women being told not to look at a pawnbroker's symbol because it would cause birth defects. It is said a beach bug was shot and killed by in Dryforjor using catfish teeth as projectile, but they had to be pulled from a live fish. Some catfish do have little teeth, but I couldn't find any references to them being used for either good luck or protection. Maybe this was kind of like how the silver bullets got a reputation for werewolves. Somebody was just guessing at it and it maybe worked. Also found in Iceland is the Lagerflorjot worm. Worm does not mean a small, wiggly dirt muncher. Worm is translated as being either a dragon or a huge lizard. The same goes in Britain, were a lot of stories involving giant worms that are actually dragons. On Trail of the Unexpected, Rob talks about the Wharton worm, which is a large lizard. In Icelandic, worm can mean serpent or dragon. The Lagerforjot worm is a lake monster seen near the town of Egilstor. The first sighting is generally conceded to have been in 1345 and the recorded in the medieval annals of the 15th century. The serpent at the lake has been mentioned in 16th century world maps as well, a 17th century chronicle, and a Baroque poem from the 17th century. The Skyrimsill, or monster, was seen at the lake in 1749 and in 1750, and the media report sightings in the 20th and 21st century. There is a video showing what might be the lake monster from 2012, but it's pretty grainy and hard to actually make out what it is they were filming. According to Folktale, published in John Arnenson's collection of writings in 1862, he talked about a heath worm, which is a type of a slug that was kept with gold. It grew into a monster that then was moved into the lake. Other heath worm stories are attached to other Icelandic bodies of water. At Skardensland, Sabine Baring-Gold, that's his name, collected accounts of a monster with a seal-like head, which had been compared to or equated to other accounts of the monster at Lagersfjord. The serpentine creature is said to live in fresh water below sea level. Glacial fed lakes, which have a very poor visibility due to runoff. The creature is described as longer than a bus, which is about 40 feet or so, and has been seen moving about on land. There are dozens of stories about Nessie being seen on land as well. The Lagerfjord worm has been spotted laying, coiled up, or slithered into a group of trees. It has many humps while swimming, just like some of the sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. The Lagerfjord worm has been sighted several times in modern times, including 1963 by the head of the Icelandic National Forest Service, Sigurður Blöndal, and in 1998 by a teacher and a student at Hallarmastor School. In 1983, contractors laying a telephone cable measured a large shifting mass near the eastern shore while performing preliminary depth measurements. When they later retrieved the non functional cable, they found that it had been broken as if it were chewed on by something. The foreman said, "This cable that was specially engineered so it wouldn't kink was wound in several places and badly torn. It was damaged in 22 different places. I believe we dragged the cable directly over the belly of the beast, unless it was drugged through its mouth." A sightseeing boat named the Lager Jorsormoren, which began operations on the lake in 1999, and the Gunnarsson Institution in Skarklauster seek to preserve the tradition of the Lagerfjordotten worm for cultural and tourism purposes. If it weren't for the Loch Ness Monster, most people would never hear of Loch Ness. It brings folks in, and folks bring money. The legend of the worm, first mentioned in 1345 in Icelandic records, the Skalholts archives. The thing seen in Lagerforjat looked like either an island or a bunch of humps sticking up out of the water, a distance hundreds of fathoms apart, but no one saw that it had either a head or a tail. The creatures were documented in archives with some frequency in subsequent times as well. A map of Iceland attributed to Bishop Gobrandur Porliksson, I think that's a P. It looks like a P, but the little hump part is halfway down. Maybe Iceland has invented a few of their own letters. Anyway, Bishop Gobrandur Porliksson, engraved in 1585 by cartographer Abraham Ortelius. The map bears inscription next to the Lagerforjat stating, "In this lake there appears a large serpent which poses a menace to inhabitants and appear when some memorable event is imminent." A briefer inscription noting only a serpent of great size is found on a Mercator map from 1595. A description of a river serpent that lives in Lagerforjat River was found in De Mir, yeah, okay, that's written in Latin. It's found in Wonders of Iceland, chapter 6, written by the bishop. The serpent was referred to as a strandevorm in Norwegian, which pretty much means Lagerforjat worm. Opinions differ on how many humps it had, given as being one or as many as three. It was blamed for making the river overflow and causing the grounds and the houses to shake when it moved. I have family that came from Sweden, but I don't speak Swedish either. My family tree is pretty messed up. A folk tale published by John Armisen in 1862, collected from a schoolgirl of Mullasyla in 1845, tells the story of the great serpent in Lagerforjat, which originally started out being a small heath worm or heath snake. It grew to unimaginable size. It has been explained elsewhere that this hearthworm is actually a type of a snail or a black slug. All depends on who translates the word. The girl had been given a gold ring by her mother, and was instructed that the best way to profit from the gold was to place it under a hearthworm. She did so, and put it in the top of her linen chest for a few days. When she went to look, she found the worm had grown so large it had broken the chest. She became frightened, and threw both the gold ring and the worm into the lake, where the hearthworm continued to grow and began terrorizing the countryside. It would spit poison, killing both people and animals. They brought in two Finns. I don't know why. I guess folks from Finland had a reputation. Well, considering the White Death, the folks from Finland do have a reputation. You don't know who the White Death was? I did a show about him a couple of years ago. Or you can just type in White Death and read about this guy that over about a 1 year period of time, he killed more Russian soldiers than is imaginable. And like I said, I'm getting off the story. Two Finns were commissioned to destroy this creature and to retrieve the gold, but they only managed to tie its head and tail to the bottom of the lake. Killing it proved to be impossible because there was a larger dragon also down below the surface. Appearances of the creature in the open was considered a portent for harsh season and crop failures. 1595, the Icelandic patriot Egart Olafsson described reports of a large aquatic animal in western Iceland's river Vita, based on old chronicles. The most detailed sighting occurred in 1595 near Skalholt. I'm not getting better at pronouncing Icelandic words. I'm just not trying to pronounce them so hard. On a Sunday afternoon, some of the parishioners from the Skalholt church were crossing the river on a ferry. They saw a monstrous creature that was as big as a house come out of the water and make off at high speed for quite a long ways down the river before diving under the surface. Its head was, according to the description, the kind of like a sea hound. Its back was garnished with high spines, and it had a very short backside. It was shaped more like a seal than a dragon. Serpents or monsters were seen in Vita again in 1636 and in 1702, but these descriptions were not very detailed. Bernard Hovelmans has associated this river animal with the Scandinavian sea serpents, particularly Hans Eged's sea serpent from 1734. He suggested that these spines could have been clumps of half-dried hair, while the short rump could have been what looked more like a pinniped's backside. That's a seal. If the animal had no tail, it could not have indicated, it could have not have been identical to Edgin's sea serpent and Hovelman's super otter. If you don't know who Bernard Hovelmans is, you're not reading enough about cryptozoology. There's been suggestions that this is a corruption of the lore surrounding creatures from Norse mythology, namely the Miagor serpent and the Fenswolf, with some elements of Fafnir, the gold-hoarding dragon, from the Volsung cycle. Similarly to the overgrown dragon in Ragnar's saga, Lubricor has also been noted, for this is the saga of the dragon which also grows large because it is associated with gold. The legend that keeps a Brexengill, or a black slug, with gold, which will make it grow enormous, is associated with other bodies of water, such as several rivers. Uh, yeah, Icelandic names I can't pronounce. Skordal was not going to try. Accounts of the serpent sitting on gold, the poisonous skate, and a strange giant seal at Lagerforjat are told in a Baroque poem, Ronkusrima, by Stefan Olafsson from 1688. The gold-hoarding serpent, according to the poem, measured 65,000 feet. I wonder who measured it. Or was the translation screwed up? You know, Napoleon wasn't nearly as short as they keep saying he was. And Napoleon was actually average height. The thing is, the French foot had 13 inches instead of 12. Why? Because they're France. When Napoleon decreed that the entire world, at least his world, was going to switch over to the metric system, his height was reduced when people translated from 13-inch feet, 2 meters. That's why they say Napoleon was so short. He was tall as Alexander the Great. John Arneson also told about the Silurian Ogskaten, or the skate seal, in his 1862 book. The creature was poisonous enough that simply touching it with one finger would kill a large man. To prevent it from doing any harm, the monster was bound by a potent magic poetry uttered by power potent, power potents, power poets. There's a term we need to bring back into use. Power poets. Other sources say the skate had 9 tails. A skate are a flat-bodied fish related to sharks and rays. The seal had strange hair-like branches growing out of its head, and it was bound with poetry at the waterfall where it dwelled. 1863, Baring Gould once more had obtained reports about a 46-foot lake monster referred to as a skermsill that surfaced in Skordalsvatn and was witnessed by at least 3 farmers. It had a head like a seal. One hump appeared in view, followed by another shortly after. A sketch was produced by one of the witnesses, and Baring Gould printed a replica of it, which I could not find. The author considered the description to bear an uncanny resemblance to the creature reported in the archives. The term skimsail in Old Norse was about equivalent to modern Icelandic skrimsli and refers to simply a monster. It was used in the sense of a sea or lake monster in Konrad Maurer's book on Icelandic folk legends, written in 1860. Baring Gould wrote that the scrimsill was also believed by local fishermen to frequent the coast of Grimsey Island, particularly the Thorskanfjord. It was often seen rocking on the surface of the water like a large boat floating keel up. In other words, flipped upside down, and was alleged to attack and sink other boats. According to Konrad Maurer, these sea creatures were also reputed to decapitate seals. The Grimsey Scrimsel allegedly came ashore in 1819, leaving many tracks on the shoreline. 1862, Baring Gould's friends interviewed another pair of farmers who lived in Skordalsvatn, who claimed to have seen the scrimsill in the lake sometime in the past. On one occasion, it was observed by 3 other farmers who also reside on the banks of the lake. When Baring Gould's friends arrived in Grund on the shore of Skorndalsön in 1862, they learned that a local farmer had observed a scrimsill on the lake the day before. The farmer estimated this one to be 46 feet, and it had a head and neck that was about 6 feet. The body was about 22, and the tail was 18. They sent an account of the sighting to Baring Gould, who described it as follows. It so happens that my 2 friends had arrived at the lake one day after the monster had been seen, deporting itself on the surface, and they had been able to obtain some curious information in regards to it. One morning, the farmer and his household had observed something unusual on the lake, and presently they were able to spot a large head like that of a seal rising above the water. Behind this appeared a back or a hump, and after an interval A second hump appeared. The creature moved slowly and seemed to be enjoying itself in the sun. Now my tongue hurts. I understand that not everybody in the world speaks English, but good Lord, some of these languages really make it difficult to pronounce these names. We have the Tower of Babel to thank for all of that. Icelandic has to be the hardest language to pronounce. Now, a lot of the boys in the white lab coats like to say, oh, these were just farmers that didn't really know anything. I am of the opinion that most farmers know far more about the world than any of the boys in white lab coats that never leave their labs. I have listeners in China. Fortunately, Chinese is a little easier for me to pronounce than Icelandic. I read a lot of these pages, and once again, the writers of them claim they were right. I don't know for sure, but this is what I read. As Mike Rowe would have said, the way I heard it. In China, the word for monster is Gai Wu, which translates as weird creature. Believe it or not, there is no such language as Chinese. They speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and several other dialects, right up there with the Pennsylvanian Dutch not being Dutch. If you have a town that you call Germantown, shouldn't that kind of let people know that you're not from Holland? Vampires are called Gai or suck blood ghosts in not Chinese. The word doesn't just name this ghoul, but it also tells you what it does. The creature sucks, literally. Zombies are called Jiangshi, which is supposed to mean stiff corpse. These living dead are so named in not Chinese for their characteristic way of hobbling about with their arms rigidly extended in front of their bodies. Zombies don't really walk like that. That was all movie nonsense. In Haiti, zombies are pretty much like normal people, except they just don't have any will of their own. They are usually used on large farms to do manual labor. And if all they could do is walk around with their arms stuck out going, brains, they wouldn't get a whole lot of work done, and therefore there really wouldn't be much need for them. The monster that a lot of folks know as Frankenstein was actually Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein was the creator of the monster. In not Chinese, the monster is called Ki Zu Gai Ren, which means technology ghost man. I hope I'm getting this all correct. This is what I read. In my book, This Sucks, I have a character known as the Count, formerly known as the Prince. People refer to Vivod Dracula as being both a count and a prince. The count's name is not Chinese. the count the count's name in not Chinese is Digu La, which means virtue ancient pole, I believe. Uh, that's what they call him. That's what they say they call him. One beast who translates well from not Chinese to English is the long wren or the wolf man. In 1903, China's answer to the Loch Ness Monster was called the Gai Wu, or weird creature, said to live in the Tianchi Lake in China's northern province of Jilin. Descriptions of the creature vary, but most witnesses describe seeing a large aquatic animal with a head that resembled a seal. In 2007, a Chinese TV reporter said he witnessed 6 of these creatures playing on the lake's surface. He described them as having fins or wings that were larger than its body. In southern China, they have a creature known as the Jinmeiju. This is a human tree creature. It is supposed to grow smiling human head fruit. The seeds of the fruit are also supposed to resemble smiling faces. I don't think I could eat anything that had a face that was smiling at me. By some accounts, when the face fruit ripens, it is edible and has a sweet and sour taste. God, I hope that's not where the sweet and sour sauce comes from. The trees were plentiful, and in some instances they were farmed. The landscape was said to be abuzz with the laughter of thousands of happy fruit heads. In modern Japanese, since the mid 2000s, the ningen has become quite popular. It is an aquatic humanoid whale like, mermaid like creature, with other sightings suggesting it has 2 legs and it roams the ice sheets of Antarctica. Inhabiting the sub-Antarctic oceans and the ice shelves. It is claimed to have been invented by Japanese 2chan user with collaborators from all over the world. By late 2007, the Japanese paranormal magazine Moo had published an article about this mysterious white figure spotted on Google Earth off the coast of Namibia, describing it as a human-shaped monster called the Ningen or the Hitogata. The magazine acknowledged the 2chan origins, but also connected the creature to older accounts of unusual sightings by a crew of a research vessel called the Soya Maru from 1958. You know, back when 2chan didn't exist yet. Just because someone gives an unknown creature a name doesn't always mean they invented it. The rake was supposedly invented in 2000 on creepypasta. The pale crawler, that is probably what most people see, including myself, has been around for thousands of years. Like I said, just because somebody names it doesn't mean they created it. The story of the Ningen began in 2007 on a post on Japanese online forum which said that the crew of a whale research ship, aka a whaling vessel, witnessed the creature as it surfaced near their ship off the Antarctic coast. Thinking it may be a submarine, they went to have a closer look, but the submarine vanished into the waves. The 2005 Google Earth capture what some people believe to be the Ningen near the Southern Ocean. 2010, the Japanese Enoshima Aquarium published a YouTube video that shows the life forms in the ocean moving about. Near the end of the video, a large object appears that looks as if it has eyes and a mouth. The folks making the video said that this was just a big rock and not a Ningen. Also around 2010, an anonymous user posted underwater footage depicting a large humanoid sea creature, which some believe to be this thing. The Ningen is described in 2 different forms. One has it as a large aquatic whale-like creature with anatomical similarities to a human. such as distinct humanoid face. Sometimes it has extremely large legs or arms with hands. About 65 to 100 feet long, the second, less common description portrays it as a considerably smaller terrestrial creature, about 30 or 40 feet long, with human-like features. The pigmentation of the creature is always said to be pale blue. It has large slit-like mouth and either small or large eyes, depending on the witness. According to the physiologists and medieval bestiaries, the Aspidochellion is a sea creature variously described as a large whale or an enormous sea turtle, and a giant sea monster with huge spines along its backbone. This is not to be mistaken for Atune, the giant space turtle. If you don't read Terry Pratchett, you're missing out on some really good stories. No matter what form it is always described as being so huge it is mistaken for being a rocky island covered with sand dunes and vegetation. The name Aspidochelon appears to be a compound word combining Greek aspis, which means shield, and chelon for turtle. It rises to the surface from the depths of the sea, and then it entices unwitting sailors with its island appearance to make landfall on its huge shell. And then the turtle or whale is able to pull them under the ocean, ship and all, drowning them and then eating the remains. It emits a sweet smell that lures fish to its trap as well. This monster is also known as the asp turtle or the great whale, depending, that has what appears to be beaches on its hide, like those from the seashore. The creature raises its back above the water. The sailors, believing it to be just an island, decide to land on it. As the sailors go about their business, they build campfires, which will annoy this giant beast that will submerge, drowning all of these men, but not necessarily for food. The Alexander romance includes the story of a monster confused as an island in Alexander's letter to Aristotle. He said, after they landed on the so-called island, and an hour passed, suddenly it proved to be no island, but a monster which plunged into the sea. We shouted as it disappeared, but some of my companions met with a wretched death, among them my best friend. Another sea monster which attacked Alexander and his companions is identified as being a giant lobster. In the Armenian version of Alexander's romances, or a beast that is also called a giant crab. If a giant thing with pincers is coming at me, I would be hard pressed to say that it was a lobster or a crab. Now I know pincers isn't spelled pinchers, but if you've never been pinched by a crab, you don't know what you're missing, and I do not recommend it. Do not go skinny dipping in the Gulf. Not me, but somebody I knew. In the Babylonian Talmud, Baba Batra 73a, Rabbi Bar Hana states, once we were traveling on a ship, and we saw a certain fish upon which sand had settled and grass grew. We assumed that it was dry land, and went up and baked and cooked on the back of the fish. But when its back grew hot, it turned over. And were it not for the fact that the ship was close by, we would have all drowned. This monster is called the Korha, in a poem by Jewish scholar Samuel Ibn Nagrila. Sea monsters so big they appear as islands are found in the Bible. Basil of Caesarea, there's no N in Caesarea. Try that again. Basil faulty. No. Basil of Caesarea, in his Hexamorion, says the following about the great whales mentioned in the fifth day of creation in Genesis 1:21. A scripture gives them the name of great, not because they are greater than shrimp or a sprat, but because the size of their bodies equals that of a great hill. When they swim on the surface of the water, one often sees them appear as if islands. But these monster creatures do not frequent our coasts or our shores. They only inhabit the Atlantic Ocean. Such are these animals created to strike us with terror and awe. If now you hear say that the greatest vessels sailing under full sail are stopped by very small fish, by the remora, and so forcibly that the ship remains motionless for a long time, as if it had taken root in the middle of the sea, do you not see in this little creature a like proof of the power of the Creator? In other words, these things like to grab ships and keep them from going forward. The allegory of the Aspidocolion borrows from the account of whales in Saint Isidore of Seville's Etymologia. Isidore cites the prophet Jonah. The Vulgate translation of the book Jonah translates Jonah 2:2 as, "The Lord heard me from the belly of hell," and not the whale. He concludes that such whales must have been bodies as large as mountains. The Arabic polymath, the Arabic polymath, Al-Jahiz, writer of the Book of Animals, mentions three monsters that are supposed to live in the sea: the tannin, or sea dragon, the ceratan, or crab, and the bala, aka the whale. About the ceratan, he said, "As to the ceratan, I have never yet met anybody who could assure me he had seen it with his own eyes. Of course, if we were to believe all the sailors telling, for they claim to have on occasion landed on certain islands having woods and valleys and fissures, and have lit a great fire, and when the monster felt the fire on its back, it began to glide away with them and all the plants growing on it, so that only such as managed to flee were saved. This tale outdoes the most fabulous and preposterous of stories." This guy must have been one of the boys in white lab coats back in the day. The problem with most skeptics is they make their declarations from the safety of libraries and buildings, never venturing out to see for themselves. This monster is also mentioned in the Wonders of Creation, written by Al-Qazwini, and in the first voyages of Sinbad, in 1001 Nights. A similar monster appears in the legend of Saint Brendan, where it was called Gasconius. Because of its size, Brendan and his fellow voyagers mistook it for an island, and they landed and made camp. They celebrate Easter on the sleeping giant's back, but awaken it when they lit their campfire. They raced to their ships, and Brandon explained that the moving island is really Disconius, who labors unsuccessfully to put its own tail in its mouth. Why it would do such a thing, I don't know. I believe what he saw looked like it was trying to bite its own tail. Perhaps that's where the campfire was, and he was trying to put out the ouch. In the saga of Orvar Odd, the Aspidacholion is known by the name Hafgufa and Lingbakar. In the folklore of the Inuit of Greenland, there was a similar monster called the Imap Umasarusa. It was a giant sea monster that often was mistaken for a vast flat island. When the monster emerged from the water, it would tip sailors off into the freezing water, causing their deaths. Whenever the water seemed shallow, the sailors would tread carefully for fear of being over this dreaded creature. In the folklore of the Yamana people of the southernmost tip of Argentina and Chile, some local waters are occupied by the lacuma, a large water spirit which can lay flat on the surface of the water and whose body can be walked across. When they submerge themselves, they can sink anybody walking on top of them. The Usala Semapunda of Zulu folklore also bears some similarities to the Aspidachilon. It is a creature so large that not only do plants and trees grow on its back, but one side of its body experiences a different season from the other. Unlike the Aspidoclolon, the Usalasempundu is a land dweller. How is it legends from people who lived thousands of miles apart could all tell the same basic story, the same creatures? Huge beasts that could be mistaken for islands. Either there was a lot more travel back then, or just maybe, these are real creatures. If so, why haven't we seen them today? Lake Utopia is located in Charleston County. It branches off the Magagudavik River. It's a decent sized lake measuring about 4.5 miles in length, and it is said that it's very deep. Well, it's very deep in some locations and shallow in others, depending on how much water is being sucked from the lake by the hydroelectric company. Lake Utopia is the hub of cabin area, and both year-round residents and summer vacationers take advantage of the lake for water activities. Lake Utopia is used by folks, but it is said that it belongs to Old Ned, the lake monster. The legend predates the European settlements. Old Ned's fame can be traced back to the late 1700s when the Micmac passed on this story to a group of local uh, farmers who had moved into the area. The newly arrived Europeans figured that this was just some superstitious nonsense used to keep the kids away from the water. Instead of being deterred, word spread, bringing in many fishermen from nearby towns who all wanted to catch a sea monster. They set out in boats, stringing baited hand lines, giant nets, all to no avail. Old Ned wasn't interested in meeting the new neighbors yet. Some believe the thinning ice drew him ashore after a cold winter. Others said old Ned was simply biding his time, setting his own schedule for his grand entrance. Some said old Ned was about 30 feet long, with the head the size of an old-fashioned bathtub. A few brave witnesses stayed close enough to report a mouth full of sharp teeth, with one even taking note of blood dripping from many of its teeth. He had a slender, undulating body that sweeps along semi submerged. Most folks describe Old Ned as covered in dark red scales, but there is also some debate as to its actual color. Some tried to explain away this monster as being nothing more than a giant sturgeon. A large sturgeon was recorded, the beluga, which was caught in 1827. It was 23 feet 7 inches long, and it weighed 3,463 pounds. These fish are covered with armor like plates, and they are noted for having an elongated body. The sturgeon is a notably calm fish. It's docile enough that boats have been able to row right up next to them. This has led to a lot of them becoming near extinct. Also, sturgeon do not have any teeth. Another explanation for Old Ned was he was a giant sea turtle. There's nothing very slender, undulating, or long about a turtle. Old Ned just might be an as of yet unidentified cetacean, a whale, or maybe a leftover prehistoric water mammal. Or maybe the new idea is going around that this is the ghost or the spirit of a long dead monstrous creature that people are just seeing. We don't know what Old Ned is, but he has been seen by a lot of people. 1867, a group at a sawmill watched as something eel-like rolled repeatedly in the water near the center of the lake. 1982, a worker at a nearby pulp mill was outside on a break when he saw a large creature surface like a submarine, with water spilling down its sides. The witness could see only a hump or a section of the body, which he thought was a huge eel, which then quickly disappeared back under the water. 1996, a group out canoeing on Lake Utopia saw this creature and began to follow it, wondering what it was. They said it was 30 to 40 feet long, and it was swimming just under the surface. It was noted that the movements were up and down, not side to side like an eel swims. There's also a strange creature said to lurk in the waters of the White River outside Newport, Arkansas. This legend is so widely accepted that the Arkansas state legislators created the White River Monster Refuge adjacent to the Jacksonport State Park. The resolution made it illegal to molest, kill, or trample or harm the White River monster while it is in its retreat. Whitey, as the locals call him, has been sighted in the White River for more than a century and a half. The creature was first spied by the Quapaw Indians, feather, not dot, who once inhabited the area, and the stories were passed down from generation to generation. According to the first accounts, the creature overturned a brave's canoe before sinking back into the depths of the river. During the days of the Civil War, Whitey was credited with sinking a Confederate gunship. The White River monster is described as being snake-like, about 30 to 40 feet long, with a spiny backbone. It makes loud bellowing noises. Most of the many reports come from fishermen and campers along the White River. 1924, a Little Rock resident reported having seen the creature, describing it as having dingy gray crusted hide. 1937, a farmer named Bramlett Bateman, who lived south of Newport, said he had seen the animal several times, saying, "The animal rises to the surface in the late afternoon and floats or swims for about 5 to 15 minutes with its head under the water." Bateman then set up a viewing area and would charge people 25 cents for a chance to see the sea monster. In 1966, 3 people fishing saw Whitey, describing it as having a tail like a mermaid, a long body, arm like flippers, and a head shaped like a monkey. In 1971, 2 men reported they found 3-toed tracks along the muddy riverbank, as well as trees near the river. The same year, the monster was photographed by a man named Cloyce Warren of the White River Lumber Company. That same year, several others saw the river monster. These multiple accounts were enough to convince the Arkansas state legislators that they should create the refuge for the beast. At least one biologist believes the White River monster was actually a elephant seal that got somehow lost and swam up a river. Whitey has become Newport's local celebrity as his facsimile leads the Christmas parade every year. And the legend has created quite a bit of tourism, and souvenir shops have sprung up all over the town. Somebody should get a hold of Jeremy Wade and see if he'll go look for it. I still have a few stories to tell, but I'm going to call it quits here because I'm over an hour long. Perhaps I'll use them in a later story. Until next time, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.